Well, for tonight's Red and Blue, I spoke with Richard Painter. Painter served in the George W. Bush White House as chief ethics lawyer. He's since become a high-profile critic of President Trump. Now, Painter is running for Senate in Minnesota as a Democrat, and like many other Democratic candidates, says he'd vote to impeach the president. For political office if Donald Trump wasn't in the White House?
Well, I don't know. There are a lot of issues I feel concerned, I feel very strongly about that we need to address. We need to address the skyrocketing cost of health care. We need to address climate change and our economic situation and the gross disparities of wealth in our country. So there are a lot of issues that preceded Donald Trump and that I think need to be addressed, and I think I could as a candidate. One of them, by the way, is campaign finance. And the corruption of our political system by big donors, and the situation has been made much worse by the Supreme Court in the Citizens United case. So there's a role for someone like myself in politics in the United States Senate.
Boy, you better get a train on that eye of his. It just kind of wanders off into outer space every once in a while. It's kind of spooky to watch.
Whether or not we have a president like Donald Trump. But I have to say, there's an additional challenge here with Trump. And we need to convene hearings of the Senate Judiciary Committee, the House Judiciary Committee, and decide what to do with him, because he does not want to play by the rules.
Justice by the President, the Vice President, the other members of the Trump administration. In Washington until we get this man and the Vice President out of office. That should be happening now, but it's not. So that's why we're going to send them a message in November. When we are finished with Donald Trump, Vice President Pence, and the rest of the Russian collaborators, we can talk about the issues that concern our country, and we better be ready for action on health care. Health care is our #1 domestic crisis. The cost of health care, which is astronomical, and many Americans cannot afford health care. Many Americans are being bankrupted by our current system. The bottom, and that's what most need is. That's what we're there. We really need to help in this economy.
Going to address the divisive program that the orange-haired piper has been so successfully good at in pitting. To address the divisive program that the orange-haired piper has. I'm wondering how you're going to address the divisive program that the orange-haired piper has been so successfully good at in pitting those of us in the lower end of the economic spectrum against each other. And I'm a program that the orange-haired piper has been so successfully good at in pitting those of us in the lower end of the economic.
House Majority Whip Steve Scalise facing new threats to his life barely more than a year after he was nearly assassinated during that congressional softball team practice. Police have arrested 63-year-old Carlos Bayon of Grand Island, New York, charging him with menacing the congressman after leaving violent voicemail messages. Authorities discovered hundreds of rounds of ammo and firearm purchase receipts in Bayon's home, along with bomb-building information. Joining us exclusively now with his reaction is House Majority Whip Steve Scalise. Congressman, it's great to see you. I'm so relieved this guy was found, this was prevented. Lord knows what might have happened. We're also awaiting the election result from Ohio 12, which we're going to talk to you about, Congressman Scalise. But your reaction to yet another violent threat against your life?
Well, Laura, it's great to be back with you, and clearly these kind of disturbing things, there's no place for it in politics. I first want to thank, once again, our United States Capitol Police. They were very quick to act when my office received this threat. They sent the information on to Capitol Police. Capitol Police did research, found out that this man has had some real serious concerns, and it was hard to track him down because he was trying to use aliases, but ultimately they found him, and he's in custody, in federal custody, and hopefully he gets a serious sentence, because you can't allow this kind of threats and violence against people based on their political views.
Congressman, did he have postings on social media about you? Did he have was it a purely political axe to grind? Was he mentally deranged, or a combination of both?
Well, I guess we'll find out a lot of that. Clearly he had some strong disagreements with my political views and others. There were others that he threatened as well. And he's going to have to account to that. And the Justice Department has him now. But again, my thanks and true appreciation goes out to our law enforcement, the United States Capitol Police, acting quickly and working with New York authorities to make sure that he got into custody.
Does this, what you see with Antifa across the country, taking over this Portland ICE office, Black Hoods, the beatdowns of conservatives, intimidations of conservatives in public? You saw what happened to Charlie Kirk and his colleague Candace Owens the other morning in Philadelphia. This stuff seems to be ratcheted up. The left blames President Trump. They say, well, he's calling the news fake news and calling them out, and that's making people more and more anxious.
No. You look at some of the liberal rhetoric that's coming out from the left. They're encouraging and inciting, in many cases, violence. And it's got to stop. In fact, liberals need to call this out. They need to speak up. Just as we're speaking up, saying that there's no place for it on the Republican or Democrat side, I think people on the left need to be as vocal at calling out this kind of violence.
Well, we were talking earlier about Facebook and Apple moving against more conservative voices beyond Alex Jones, but to other conservatives who've seen their voices diminished on these mega platforms, trillions of dollars of market cap in these companies. Are you concerned that groups like Antifa, which have incited violence at these rallies, they continue on YouTube and so forth and Facebook, seemingly with impunity? Other groups like them.
Yeah, it's clearly a double standard. We've pointed some of this out. In fact, when Mark Zuckerberg testified before the Energy and Commerce Committee that I sit on just a few weeks ago, I brought this up, the bias that we're seeing in Facebook as they put a new algorithm in place to change the way that people get their news feeds, and where they're literally, we're starting to filter from what we've seen, a left-leaning way in having a bias against conservatives. We've raised it to them, and they've gotten back to me to let me know that this is something they're looking into, but we need to watch it closely, because if they get into a position where it looks like they're trying to become the platform of the left, there are other social media sites people can go to and will go to if it becomes a liberal site. Well, they don't want their site to become a liberal site.
Yeah, monopoly. They don't want them to have monopolist power. We're almost out of time. You predict this Ohio 12 is going to go Republican, Congressman?
Our next guest immigrated to New York from Guyana when he was just 7 years old. He remembers the years his parents had to wait for visas to come to the United States, the hard decisions they had to make, including leaving a sick child behind and the hours of studying they had to do to pass the naturalization test. In a new op-ed, he explains why that experience shows him President Trump is right on immigration, writing, quote, "Today, if somebody hops the U.S. border and gives birth to a child, that child gets the exact same benefit that took my parents 8 years to achieve. That's a huge flaw in our immigration system." The author of that op-ed joins us right now, Neil Gouveia. is a higher education fundraiser, and he joins us live in New York. Neil, good morning to you.
Thank you for having me here.
What a story you've got. When you were a child, your parents decided we are going to take a risk. We are going to go to the United States. You had nothing, but they did it anyway, didn't they?
Yeah, absolutely. America's a land of opportunities, and this is a place where we could create our own destiny, so it's definitely worth it.
And when they came here from Guyana, they decided, you know what, rather than just melt into the landscape and hide, we're going to do it the right way.
Absolutely. You follow the rules. There was no skipping the line. There was a lot of patience.
Right.
And so we just had to really take our time and let things unfold.
But why did they decide we're going to follow the rules? We're going to sign the guest book. We're going to wait it out.
Because that was the only option. We wanted to be productive members of society. We came to assimilate, to integrate. We wanted to be members of the American culture.
And in the beginning, it was tough. I think I read that your father died when you were 9 years old. He was a cleaner, and he sold fruit, and he lived a tough life, but it was all to get you kids ahead.
Well, it was actually my my little sister that eventually passed away, who we had to leave behind.
Okay.
And yeah, she initially wasn't able to come to the United States because there's a strict physical you have to go through to come to the United States. So initially she didn't pass, she didn't make it. So we had to make that journey to bring her back the legal way, you know, taking the proper steps. And so once she was here in the United States, she eventually passed away. But, you know, it's still a journey we have to take.
Absolutely. Tell us why you feel, as an immigrant who did it the right way, that the president is right on immigration.
Well, it's really important to enforce that this is a country of rule and laws, and we have to let people know that, you know, that these rules were set up so they can be followed. We, people like me and my family, we took the long way, but we had to be really patient about it. But this is the way to do it. There's no other way. And if you want to be productive members of society in this country, you have to just follow the guidelines.
You live in New York City, and you have a conservative point of view. Where'd that come from?
Well, this all happened in 2016 when I just started like thinking for myself, looking through a different outlook, meeting other conservatives, and I realized that, you know, conservatives were not out to get me. They just had they don't want certain ideologies forced upon them. And so through dialogue and exchange, I realized I actually have a lot in common with this group of people.
Sure. You know, the U.S. Congress had a chance to do something in the past year on immigration reform. Obviously, you want more people to come to the United States legally, but right now the system's screwed up.
Absolutely. I think what President Trump is suggesting is actually these are things that are already practiced in Australia and Canada. Merit-based immigration system where you invite people over who want to be part of, who want to be embrace our ways of life, our values, which are very important. In addition to having skills that fit the society.
You're proud to be an American, I can tell.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, it's great to make your acquaintance, Neil.
Voted for him, and the free system that allowed it to happen in American history. From the highest levels of government to their media, universities, and billionaires, their hateful defiance of his legitimacy is an insult to each of us. But the ultimate insult is that they think we're so stupid that we'll let them get away with it. These saboteurs slashing away with their leaks and smears, their phony accusations and gagging sanctimony, drive their daggers through the heart of our future, poisoning our belief that honest custody of our institutions will ever again be possible, so they can then build their utopia from the ashes of what they burned down. No, their fate will be failure, and they will perish in the political flames of their own fires. We are the National Rifle Association of America, and we are freedom's safest place.
It is. Hey, I'm Greg Gutfeld with Candace Owens, Geraldo, Jesse Waters, and she plays hide and seek in a dollhouse. Dana Frito, bye. By now, you've all heard about CNN viewers harassing people they don't like at dinner.
President. You ain't support.
Nelson, Harold, Dylan, locking up immigrant children.
It's awesome. Anarchists and socialists ruining other people's lunch just to make them miserable before the check comes. It's pure unconscious brain function where screaming and other reflexes are only possible if it doesn't involve actual thinking. This is what fascism looks like when it first puts on its baby jackboots. It's so adorable when they first try to walk in them. I feel for their families, but I know their families don't talk to them. They just send money because people like this don't have jobs. What we're seeing is a contagion. This is what failure looks like. Unemployable yahoos who join a mob and demand people with jobs just give up. It's physically repulsive. I mean, literally physically repulsive. Meaning it's time for Greg's golden rule of anger. Thou shalt not yell. Check out that beard. That's commandment 12. It's right there. The more you yell, the better it feels. But the worse you look, just watch. Should be our cold open. I love her. But she is just thinking what Rosie's saying.
I believe he should be impeached. I'm sickened by Congress that doesn't call for articles of impeachment. We have to fight with everything we got, because if somehow they're able to rig the elections again, as I believe they did in 2016, then we're going to all be in trouble as democracy dies right here on our watch.
Like fun. In fact, Rosie seems like a perfect fit for the resistance. If the Democrats don't make her their 2020 candidate, they're missing the boat. Meanwhile, in West Hollywood, the Democratic Council bravely voted to remove Trump's Walk of Fame star. Yeah, I'm sure that really ruined Trump's day. Sorry, if losing your star on the Walk of Fame is the price you pay for being a president who gets stuff done, you know where you can stick that star. Dana has a name for it. Never let you forget it, Dana. Filthy, filthy Dana. All right, so what was the word?
And just to be clear, the entire police force was built of black and Hispanic men, save 1 out of the 11 police officers happened to be white. The rest were all black and Hispanic, and they were shouting race traitor to us. The entire Antifa gang, if you guys don't know, watching at home, consists of all white people. There are no black people in this crowd. So it was very rich to watch them yelling at us, calling us white supremacists, telling us we were race traitors because we don't necessarily believe that we have to vote Democrat.
Can I ask you, you know, Chris Hahn went after you, and it's becoming this thing. I saw it, they're saying like, oh, how could this happen? It's so convenient that these guys are actually eating at the same restaurant.
Yeah.
So,
the most ridiculous thing, the restaurant opened, we sat down first, suddenly a table of 4 came in and they all had on Antifa decals. You know, part of being an Antifa is you're not allowed to shower. I'm not saying that to be funny, they don't shower. Yeah, that's real. They have like, yeah, it's a political statement because they don't like society, they don't like the system, so part of this is being filthy and unbathed. So they walked in.
So you were noticeable.
Yeah, they were quite noticeable. They sneered at me and Charlie and they sat down. But here's what we did wrong. We underestimated the left. We thought they could get through breakfast peacefully and sit there and eat their meal and allow us to do the same. But of course, they were sending out a bat signal for all of the other Antifa protesters to come and arrive and to stalk and harass us.
wow.
Were you frightened at any time?
I was only frightened that I might react. That was the biggest concern, because when someone has a bullhorn that is this close to your ear and they're shouting and calling you a race traitor, and someone has a whistle on the other side of your ear and they're calling you names, they are really testing your relationship with
They want you to.
Christ.
They want you to, because then that makes great tape if you react. So the whole thing is to bait you into doing something that you end up not able to live down. Rod, I want to ask you, you are an icon. You've been around for like at least 70 years on this planet. You've been through so many different eras. So many different eras. And we have a lot of people saying, my God, there's no dialogue. I'm one of these people. I worry about this dissent and everything. Does this seem even close to the stuff that you've been seeing? I mean, are we over-exaggerating?
I think that this is much more theatrical than it was down in 1968, 1969. It was real violence then. There was a division in the country where there were times where people were thinking the country was going to be torn asunder.
Yeah.
I mean, it was generational. It was partially racial, not as bad, I think, as today in terms of the race aspect of it. But there was bitterness, there was separation, there was lack of communication, there was absolutely, you didn't trust anyone over 30. Yeah. Republicans were automatically racist. It was very, very bad. I just want to say something about what happened to Candace. I deplore that absolutely just as I deplore what happened to CNN's Jim Acosta at the Trump rally in Tampa. I think that this is going beyond the pale. It is intolerable. And if you push me, for instance, I'm going to push you back in a physical way. And I know that, didn't they spill water on you at some point?
Yeah, so Jim Acosta, it was a chant, right? They threw water, they threw eggs, they threw food at us. So this was different. And we were not at a Trump rally. This wasn't a political gathering. We were eating breakfast.
What did the cops do when they threw stuff at you?
They asked if we wanted to press charges, and Charlie said no. Charlie said, we don't want to press charges. You know, I think that he felt that he didn't want to turn them into a martyr, to make them go home and feel, oh, look, you know, I got arrested because I was defending, or I don't know what they think they're defending, I guess.
Did you at least get a free breakfast out of that?
Of trying to guess what most important conversation America can have today with Cody Wilson, instead of speculating, instead of trying to guess what he is doing and what he believes. Talk to him yourself. Cody Wilson, the founder of Defense Distributed. Cody, first of all, correction. You say I was wrong on something?
Oh, I don't know if it's what you meant, but
okay.
There's a law from the 1960s called the Gun Control Act, and it is a law that requires a serial number to be put on a gun, but only if that gun is made by a commercial manufacturer, dealer, or distributor.
Correct.
So American individuals, your listeners at home, have the legal right to make a gun for themselves for their own use, and they don't have to put a serial number on it. That's what I just wanted to make sure was clear.
We're on the same thing. Everybody has a right to do this themselves right now. The deal is do you have the expertise and the equipment to do it, and 3D printing? They're trying to make it sound like everybody can just run out and buy one of these printers, which you could, but you could also get the milling machine and make one yourself as well.
It's pretty expensive too. I mean, they make it seem like this is the easiest thing in the world. Cody, I'm curious, one of the points that keeps being brought up against you is the idea that we should not have the right, and we don't have the right, to create a gun out of plastic that cannot be detected by metal detectors. How do you react to that?
Well, there's a law in the books about this, although it's never really been serious. There's never been enforcement about it. It was passed when the Glock was brought to market, and Brady, who used to be called Handgun Control Incorporated, got this law passed. But now it's a real law, like on accident almost. So I agree. I think we can pass laws at some level that conform with our security norms. But remember, there were never metal detectors in the 1700s, and we made it. Okay, we made it, guys.
So, but can every piece of a gun be made out of plastic? The springs, the firing pins. I mean, the bullets. Doesn't that show up on? Wouldn't a bullet show up?
Of course.
Yes.
Of course. Now, this gun this is probably the most plastic a gun's ever been made out of, at least, I don't know, outside of the DOD and like the spy games, the Cold War, right? I've heard rumor of, and I've had years to meet many people who've told me about famous composite guns in the spy games of the Cold War, but no, you need metal to have a firing pin. You need metal in your cartridges, your ammo.
Okay. Cody, thank you very much. Thanks for talking to us.
UFOs to ghost and psychic powers, history is riddled with unexplained events. Here are the facts. On December 10th, 2004, journalist Gary Webb was found dead with 2 gunshot wounds to his head in Carmichael, California. The coroner ruled the death a suicide, and Webb's ex-wife noted that he had been depressed after a falling out with his employers at the San Jose Mercury. Gary Webb was a controversial but lauded journalist. In 1996, he wrote a series of articles for the Mercury that were later made into a book called Dark Alliance. Prominent newspapers attacked this series, including the Washington Post and the New York Times. Eventually, Webb's own paper backed away from his work. Many believe that being professionally discredited drove him to suicide, and his claims were exaggerated. Yet conspiracy theorists believe Gary Webb was murdered because his story was not only true, but the beginning of an international scandal. So what did he actually write? Here's where it gets crazy. In this series, Webb alleged that Nicaraguan Contras were responsible for the Los Angeles crack cocaine epidemic of the 1980s. He also claimed that the CIA knew of these operations and, at the very least, ignored them. At worst, he alleged they actually covered up the crimes. With extensively documented sources, Gary Webb built a case that argued the Contras were able to somehow get cocaine into the U.S. and get cash out much more easily than other drug-running organizations. Without having to pay the cost of transportation, the Contras were able to sell cocaine at bargain basement prices. Webb claimed that this cheap cocaine flooded the market, enabling the crack epidemic. While these allegations were severe, they were not far-fetched. In South and Central America, it's not unusual for revolutionary groups to use the drug trade as a way to raise money. Other groups such as FARC and the Shining Path have both employed similar strategies. Yet why were the Contras able to move their product with such ease? According to Gary Webb, it's because they had the support of the CIA. Webb never claimed that the CIA provided outright assistance to the Contras, but he did claim the CIA had knowledge of this drug trade for some time. Why on earth would an agency of the U.S. government allow criminals to bring drugs into the country? To Webb, it was a matter of realpolitik. The money the Contras generated from the drug trade allowed them to wage war in Nicaragua, attempting to overthrow the leftist Sandinista government. Supporting the Contra army was so important that the CIA also prevented the Department of Justice and the DEA from prosecuting several known Contra smugglers. The Reagan administration had already established a precedent for this behavior by tolerating drug trafficking, as long as the trafficking benefited the Contras. Additionally, later CIA investigations partially vindicated Webb's findings. It seemed that Gary Webb was professionally redeemed, so why do conspiracy buffs think he was murdered? According to conspiracy theorists like Alex Jones, Webb was assassinated to prevent the publication of a second book, one with even more evidence of criminal activity by the CIA. Some of Webb's acquaintances say that he told them if he was found dead, it would not be a case of suicide. The conspiracy world is rife with questions regarding this death, including debates about the ability to deliver 2 self-inflicted gunshots. This becomes a conspiracy within a conspiracy. To the mainstream, Gary Webb committed suicide because he was blackballed for speaking truth to power, and people who believe he was murdered are only prolonging the pain for Webb's surviving family and friends.
August 8, 2016. And I'll preface it by saying this for context. Ms. Page said, not ever going to become president, right? Right?
No, he's not. We'll stop it.
Repeat that again.
No, he's not. We'll stop it.
August 15th, 2016.
I want to believe the path you threw out for consideration in Andy's office, that there's no way he gets elected, but I'm afraid we can't take that risk. It's like an insurance policy in the unlikely event you die before you're 40.
That was Republican Congressman Darrell Issa questioning anti-Trump FBI agent Peter Strzok a couple of weeks ago during a joint House committee hearing last month. Meanwhile, newly released emails are showing that Strzok wanted to keep his security clearance and other FBI powers as he transitioned away from the FBI and to the Robert Mueller Russia investigation. Congressman Darrell Issa joins me right now to talk more about that. He is a member of the House Oversight, Judiciary, and Foreign Affairs Committees. And Congressman, it is always a pleasure to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me on, and thanks for teeing it up with the fact that the more we know about Peter Strzok, the more we need to know more.
Yeah, well, that's what I want to ask you. I mean, I want to ask you where your investigation stands right now. But first, what about this idea that Peter Strzok did not want to give up his security clearances? A moment ago, I was talking to Congressman Peter King about this revolving door about how security clearances perpetuate top-level corruption in the United States because they're using their security clearances as their bona fides to get a new job, and then they're using that job to actually lash out at President Trump if they don't agree with him.
Well, exactly. And this isn't new. At the end of the Clinton administration, we had people showing up and putting classified documents into their clothes and walking out with one-of-a-kind documents because they still had access. This is a problem. In the case of Peter Strzok, what was interesting was he didn't just want to keep his clearance. He wanted to keep, to use a term, special powers, powers that even the Speaker of the House doesn't have. Issuing national security letters, meaning doing investigations without the normal protections of a court order, and the ability to declassify documents selectively, meaning to create an environment in which you could leak something and say it isn't classified because you've declassified it. For Mueller, these were special powers that no one understood he had, and Peter brought to the fight, if you will.
So should President Trump be revoking these security clearances for those people who are no longer working in government, like a John Brennan, like Clapper?
Yep.
Well, there's a principle in classified information, which is need to know. And if you're acting the way Brennan or Clapper, who lied to Congress and admitted it, if you're acting that way, you no longer have a need to know. And for that reason, they shouldn't. And I think the important thing is, if you're a former cabinet officer, you're a former high-ranking official, and you might be called, great. But that's a decision of the president or the current administration. And I think it's extremely important that this not be a guarantee, a right, but rather a privilege of those who continue to volunteer and help America in these difficult times. There are many people, former commandants and so on, who maintain their...
And you can also put up the fight that I don't think anybody from this administration is going to call on the last administration for any advice, since they seem to all be turning out to be just as corrupt as the administration before. It's time to pull the security clearances for anyone who is no longer in a job in the government intel committees or agencies.
Their clearances, and their behavior is such that we want to have them as advisors. But there are clearly exceptions.
Congressman, your committee, the Judiciary Committee, as well as Intel and Oversight, are investigating really what happened during the 2016 election, and I want to ask you where that investigation stands. But first, listen to this. Listen to Jim Clapper, former head of the NSA, on CNN recently, basically admitting that President Obama directed these agencies. Listen to this.
And I'm alluding now to the president's criticism of President Obama for all that he did or didn't do before he left office with respect to the Russian meddling. If it weren't for President Obama, we might not have done the intelligence community assessment that we did that set off a whole sequence of events which are unfolding today, notably Special Counsel Mueller's investigation. President Obama is responsible for that, and it was he who tasked us to do that intelligence community assessment in the first place.
Well, there you go. He just admitted it, that President Obama directed the intelligence agencies to launch these special investigations into possible collusion between Trump and Russia, of where, of course, we have no evidence of. How far up the ladder do you think it goes?
All the way to the White House.
Well, it clearly goes to the top, and this is the problem we had with the last administration was there was this sort of deniability by the attorney generals and by the president, and then later on you discover, no, they were intimately involved. And no question at all, this is an example where President Obama was hoping, in fact, to win the election and use this information against the opposing party. Hillary Clinton didn't win. They got a special prosecutor under essentially false pretenses. If we had known before what we know now, particularly about Peter